Okay, so another topic that I love to talk about, the mental game. Is it holding you back? Probably yes. It's probably holding everybody back because we're complex beings, us humans. And when I'm talking about the mental game right now, I'm not talking about it specifically from the framing that I usually talk about it, which is we're talking about our mental game leaks, things that happen in the game and expose certain emotional issues that we may have, which causes us then to fall into a worse performance, and that we have to look at that emotion, kind of understand the triggers, understand how those triggers then sort of manifest into some kind of a reaction for us, and then we sort of figure out, okay, well, now I understand all of these things. How do I talk back to it? How do I better navigate the triggers? And then how do I mitigate the response? And that's kind of, in a nutshell, how we tackle that aspect of the mental game. But what I'm going to be talking about right now is more on a broader topic that you could take this idea as a fundamental aspect of just what it is to be human, and you could apply it to many different areas. And I'm going to go to the Buddhist philosophy, which I'm by no means an expert of in any sense, but I was reading something on this topic a long time ago, long time ago, like 15 years ago or something. And there was something that just jumped out to me straight away, which is that they have this idea that resistance is an emotion. They classify resistance as an emotion. And I found that to be very interesting because we don't tend to do that here in the West. And the reason, or rather the connection that they draw with resistance to another philosophy that they have, which is right action, is very critical, because the idea is that you know what to do, generally speaking, that will be good for you to do objectively. But oftentimes there is a feeling of resistance that can distract you away or deter you away, disincentivize you from doing the right action, the thing that you know that you should be doing objectively, that will be objectively good for you. If you remove all emotion and you just say, what is the best thing for me to be doing right now for my growth, then if you're not going and doing that thing, you are not taking the right action, as they describe it in their philosophy. And so I wanted to raise this idea just to help maybe give people maybe just like a pause for thought. Maybe you see this video and you're thinking to yourself, like, later on, I'm just trying to plant the seed. Hey, what's going on here? Because there are things as human beings that we come across, and we know that we should do something to make the improvements that we're looking to make, and we don't do it, and there's this uncomfortable feeling. And this uncomfortable feeling, we can't quite put our finger on it. We're not really sure what it is, but it's in between us and the right action and the thing that we know that we should be doing that will benefit us the most. And so, what's going on there? Usually what tends to happen, at least in my experience and in speaking with others, is we become very distractible. We're very prone to distraction because we want to be distracted. We don't want to confront this thing for some reason or another. And the sooner you're able to identify what is it exactly about this right action that is feeling sort of dysphoric, what's creating the resistance to me? Is it because I just don't want to do extra work right now? Is it because I feel like I am not able to do the thing? I have some fears around it. There can be all sorts of different reasons, but we need to really, much like with the mental game leaks, we need to really isolate what is it, because that's going to help us to overcome it. And so this is important because, speaking of another fundamental principle, competition is fundamentally about getting more advantages than your opponent and being able to execute those advantages, being able to compound the advantages and really understand how to leverage those advantages so that you can over time win. Because if you have more advantages and you play them correctly than your opponent, then you're going to win. And so if we think about it from just a super zoomed out perspective, and just look at it instead of just on competition day, but think about what are all the things that we could be doing all the time that would give us edges over other people? Well, one of those things is having the awareness to understand when resistance is taking place and is getting in between us and the thing that we should be doing. Because think about how much time you might be wasting by not actually confronting this resistance, trying to understand it and then resolve it so that you can get through it and then get into that right action and doing so effectively. Because if you're not doing that, then you're going to be leaving a lot of edges on the table. And the capacity to reshape your actions is going to lead to, if you're executing those new actions consistently, those new actions consistently executed become habits. They become your behavior. And your behavior, as it's reinforced, becomes your destiny. You know, this is a great quote. I forget who said it, but this is a great idea, I would say, because what are we in this world if nothing but a collection of actions? You know, that's what we are. That is how we manifest ourselves into the world and affect other outcomes, other people, other things. How we create things is by bringing ourselves into the world through our actions. And our actions come from our ideas and our thoughts and our ability to direct those ideas and thoughts to what is the most valuable idea and thought. And then we take action that aligns with that. And so if it's the case that you are acting on ideas and thoughts or emotions that are not serving you, and you're allowing that to take place, you are effectively giving up edges that would help you to progress as a person in any field at all. So I think this is something that's important to consider, because the very capacity to reshape yourself as a person, much like a lot of you have experienced, I mean, you can take the experience of improving as a player on the server as a great example of this. What is the process by which you undergo improvements as a player in that arena? Well, you start out and you don't really know all of the things that you're bad at, but through experience and some analysis, and you develop over time from just sticking in the game and just playing continually, you start to understand, oh, I need to improve this area. Oh, I need to improve this area. And what is it that you're doing there? You're changing the way that you understand the environment, and then you're making different decisions. Or maybe you get an idea that, oh, responding in this situation with a more defensive approach is going to actually be more optimal. So you've now collected some ideas that are new and more valuable, and then you're learning how to integrate those ideas to change your decision making as a player. And now you're a different player because you're a better player, actually. So this is the same idea with how we try to understand how we're doing things in life as well. If we just stay the same, and this is the sinister aspect of this, there are forces within us that want us to stay the same because it's safer. There are forces within us that are going to, forces is kind of like a weird abstract way to put it, but there's our emotions, for example, aren't necessarily rational. That's a better way to put it. And so our emotions can create a scenario where we are more distractible because emotionally we are kind of working against ourselves because we don't want to do it. It's gonna be dysphoric. We want to move away from dysphoric things. We want to move towards things that feel good, like scrolling, doom scrolling through social media and getting the dopamine hits, like the instant gratification. We're addicted to it. And so we have to find ways to resist some of these things that we're addicted to. We have to find ways to push through some of the barriers that we have that we don't know that we have. So it's super important to understand where those invisible barriers might be appearing and guiding your actions. Because at that point, how fully in control are you of your own destiny? That's a really important thing to ask yourself. How much control have you taken over these processes? If you're able to create a schedule and create a process like I've talked about in the previous video, you're able to execute it with discipline and all the rest of it. And this is why discipline is super important, by the way. Then you're going to be in a great spot, because the more you practice that discipline and executing things just as you have decided to kind of set out to do so, and you have more and more practice pushing through resistance and understanding your own resistance, you're going to get to a place where you will experience improvements far more consistently, and you have way more control over the overall system that's guiding your improvement, that's guiding your transformation. And this is something. I'll give you an example that's a bit more concretized that I think I've seen a lot of players. There's a lot of players out there that will they'll fail, right? Professional players, I've seen this behavior from a lot of different professional players over the years. So they'll fail in a competition, and then what they'll end up doing is, okay, they'll feel bad, and what they'll decide to do is, okay, I need to work harder. So what they end up doing is they give themselves the illusion that they're working harder, because what they end up doing is they end up spending more time only doing the things they're comfortable doing, which is grinding matches or death matches or whatever it might be, but they actually aren't spending time on the things that would actually help them. And that's how they got into the problem in the first place, because they were unable to have a process that's more well-rounded, that is able to help them to actually do the hard shit that they don't want to do that would actually help them. So, and there is a somewhat of a correlation between stuff that you don't want to do and stuff that's hard and growth, because what do we understand? We can use the gym as an analogy, or, just, I guess this is an evolutionary perspective on weightlifting, for example. The universe doesn't know, or rather your body doesn't know if you're running away from something or if you're lifting weights, but that's a separate point here. A separate evolutionary point. What I actually mean to say is your body is resistant to putting on more metabolically active tissue. And so you have to provide a lot of resistance to convince it to do that, because from a survival perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, okay, got back on the right train here, it is very costly to then increase the amount of energy demand, like food demand, that you have, because you have more metabolically active tissue. So you have to create an argument that is, okay, well, it's going to help me to fucking survive, because that's what this shit's about, survival. So eventually, if you have enough, resistance and volume, that feels it's going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to be pushing outside of your comfort zone to achieve this. It's going to require grit and effort and determination to push the effort to create the adaptation in your muscles. Now you're going to get that growth because you pushed enough, and it's going to be dysphoric enough. And there's so many examples of this whereby we stress our bodies and our bodies give us benefits in return. It seems to be somewhat of a universal concept that growth necessitates pushing through resistance. Actually, it's very important that we do that. So discipline is really key with this, and practicing discipline is really key for this, because it's one of the biggest tools, the greatest sort of virtues that every single person can foster this just by doing it over and over and over again, picking stuff that you want to stick to, keeping yourself accountable, being honest with your training, what's working, what's not working. Sometimes you don't need to change anything. So like there's good systems that you can employ that can help you to learn, okay, if I do have a system that I'm sticking to, at what point do I know when to change things? How do I know when things are getting too easy or I'm getting too comfortable? That can be hard to understand, and I'm sure that many people watching this might have that question. How do I figure that out? It's a very tricky thing to figure out. And so you can, as I mentioned, have varying systems to deal with this. One thing that I used to do is I would have essentially kind of like blocks that might be the competitive season, where I'm gonna design my training, my process for a specific season that may last, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And then I'll just execute. And then I'll take a point to review and say, okay, what are all the things in my system that worked? What are all the things that I feel like were not working? And then now I'm going to recreate it and try to trim the fat and keep only the stuff that was really helpful, and then add in new stuff that I think is required to respond to the issues that I saw over this kind of sample size of data. So that's one way that you can do it. And if you do have a well thought out system, it's very much easier to see really what's going on. If you're a player that has a system that does not exist, then it's very hard to know what to tweak or change. If you're experiencing problems, it's much harder to pinpoint the source of the issue, or where you could look to in your system, what you could look to maybe change or tweak that could address that. Because the thing is sometimes we just don't know where the problem is coming from, but you can adjust different points of the system at different times. So for example, maybe you're playing too much. So maybe you play less and emphasize higher quality reps. That could be a change that you make. And maybe after doing that for a while, you realize maybe that's not the issue. And maybe you try to play super disciplined, and you define what that means in terms of, I talked about this in a recent video. Maybe it's the case that you need to do a lot more work on theory and how you integrate new decision making. That could be a focus. And so if you do have a system that allows for you to kind of have these different areas that you can kind of focus on one at a time, you're actually able to troubleshoot stuff even if you don't precisely know what's holding you back. And it's going to give you a feeling that you're always working on something and you're always pushing yourself in one of these areas, because you've defined them all. If you don't define any of the process, it's very hard to then understand which area you can push yourself on, and how you should be pushing yourself there, because you haven't created any kind of way to track that in the first place. So with all of this said, just taking it back to the beginning, the mental game is transformative, and it encompasses your ability to understand what is going on when you're experiencing the resistance, because you have to be able to push through it, and you have to be aware of when it's fucking you up, because it will be this sinister force. It will make you forget things. There's this a famous example that's used in psychology about how our emotions can impact our memory, that there's not an uncommon thing that people just forget about their dentist appointment because they have a huge degree of anxiety associated with it. And so there's this phenomena where they end up like actually forgetting because of that fear. So it's happening unconsciously. And so we need to try to be honest with ourselves when all of these kind of dynamics are going on. So with that said, that's the video. I know some of you guys like to hear me ranting about this kind of stuff, so I felt like I'd just go for it. So I hope you guys liked it. Remember, you can support my channel through various means. I haven't plugged my Patreon in a while, so I've been appreciating all the support there. I want to keep pumping out a lot more content as we move forwards, and I am doing a lot of other stuff in the background at the moment, so I'm trying to figure out ways to make more content with way less time, and so having that time back as the channel grows and I can monetize it better over time is going to be super helpful for me to do that with. And also, obviously, I love hearing you guys's. Can I speak English, good or bad? It sounds like it's bad. But I hope that you guys are able to give me some extra feedback on these types of videos and these topics, because I love to talk about them, and people always tell me that not enough people are raising these things in the competitive scene. So I will catch you guys on the next one. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.